Let's finally put a bow on Season 3 with my Calgary Stampeders this month. Also, let's have some KFC, some Pop Shop, some candy canes, and grab your popcorn. As you know what it means, it's time, as I mentioned, for another episode of... Hi there, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, and welcome back to a special playoff edition of my Calgary Stampeders this month. Here we are up to Season 3, episode number 6, as the Calgary Stampeders wrapped up their 75th anniversary season. Finally got myself the anniversary jersey. However, I'm not bouncing off the walls here because, sadly, we did not win the Grey Cup. And as I was heartbroken, as I meant to say, for how heartbroken I was after the Calgary Stampeders playoff game. I don't think people in Hamilton are going to give me much sympathy because I think they were going to be a little more heartbroken when I recap the games. As I mentioned with KFC, Pop Shop, candy canes, or generic popcorn containers, these awesome 75th anniversary jerseys brought on those memes at the start of the season, but now we are finally at the end of Season 3. This season definitely took a lot longer to complete, and of course, getting my notes together sometimes takes a few hours to get together and finally get to record. So before I get into my notes and recap how the CFL Playoffs in the 108th Grey Cup went, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans' journey, home of the Flames, Saskatchewan Roughnecks, and Stampeders, of course, if you like the new or vintage logo, just make sure you hit like and subscribe. Mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, recapping games and stories. I also do a variety of non-sports content, like personal vlogs, attempt to comedy. And I also do share my experience when I'm on the road, right disappointment, and I've done some vlogging to go. And of course, I got my second channel in Brett Hornby Shorts, where I put my short form content on that channel with YouTube Shorts. So I appreciate like and subscribe both here on my main channel as well as my second channel. So let's recap the playoffs, shall we, for the 2021 CFL Playoffs. We're on the road to the 108th Grey Cup. I did make my on the road to the Grey Cup videos previewing the games, but now we're back into my Calgary Stampeders this month to wrap up Season 3. So given this was a COVID-shortened 14-game season, playoffs started later. This was the latest that the Grey Cup has ever been awarded in the 108-year history, and also happened for the fourth time. So you know what I mean. When I get there, so the semi-finals. The semi-finals did not happen until the week after when the 108th Grey Cup originally was supposed to be scheduled. So the semi-finals, both the East and West semi-finals, happened on Sunday, November the 28th, as the first game had the Montreal Alouettes taking on the Hamilton Tiger Cats at home. And this game was in Hamilton at Tim Hortons Field. It was 11 a.m. kickoff. Ultimately, in that game, it was the Hamilton Tiger Cats keeping their dream alive of being in the Grey Cup at home as they beat the Montreal Alouettes 23-12. Quick way to recap and remember this game is I felt the Montreal Alouettes, they definitely outplayed the Hamilton Tiger Cats in the first quarter, but they did not take advantage of the opportunities, and ultimately Hamilton had a big second quarter and ran away with this game. Who stood out in the East semi-final? Well, on the Hamilton side of the ball, it was Jeremiah Mazzoli, who was at quarterback for that game. He was 18 for 28 for 184 yards with one touchdown, no interceptions. It was Don Jackson, who won for 13 times for 46 yards. Brandon Banks was the leading receiver with 5 catches for 56 yards and a touchdown. But the big story why also Hamilton won this game was the defense, because they sacked Hamilton sacked Trevor Harris on the Montreal Alouettes 6 times, and they also stopped the running attack of William Stanback. Because if you look at the Montreal numbers, Trevor Harris, he was 28 for 44. He threw for 364 yards with 1 touchdown and 1 interception. William Stanback, he only had 12 carries for 29 yards, so that was the big story of this game. Eugene Lewis was the leading receiver on Montreal. He had 6 catches for 129 yards and a touchdown. And Montreal also committed 5 turnovers. So that was a combination of that why Hamilton won the East semi-final. But the West semi-final definitely was the game that I was more engaged in. As a Calgary Stampeders fan, that brought goosebumps because we were taking on the Saskatchewan Roughriders in Saskatchewan, and it was at Mosaic Stadium at 2:30. In this game, I'll break down more in depth. And as I say, this game will definitely be a classic for years to come, but I might have let a spoiler at the beginning where I said I was heartbroken, but I think Hamilton Tiger fans will ultimately be more heartbroken. So to recap this game in depth, like I always do with my Calgary Stampeder games, with my Calgary Stampeders of the month, well, Calgary did receive the opening kickoff and got the first down, but the drive ended with a punt midfield. And then Saskatchewan started at their own 18-yard line for their first drive, ended it with a 2-and-out and a punt. So Calgary's next drive started at the Saskatchewan 40-yard line. Calgary ended off with a 2-and-out. However, Rene Paredes, we were in field goal range as he attempted a 48-yard field goal. He missed it, and ultimately it was wide. And Jamal Morrow, the returner for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, he had a coming-out party in this game as he returned the missed field goal for a touchdown. But the big but was it was called back on a close illegal block. So ultimately that wiped out that return, and as a result of that penalty, Saskatchewan started with the ball at their own 5-yard line. This was with 9 minutes to go in the first quarter, so still 0-0. After William Powell short run for Saskatchewan, the next play was Cody Fajardo. He threw an interception to Jonathan Moxey for Calgary, and Calgary had the ball right away at the Saskatchewan 5-yard line on the return. So Calgary definitely had another opportunity to score. And then on the next play, it was Kadeem Carey, the running back for Calgary. He ran in the 5-yard touchdown. So after the point after, Calgary took an early 7-0 lead with 7:42 to go in the first quarter. Next drive for Saskatchewan, they started on their own 30-yard line after the kickoff. Saskatchewan did string together a couple first downs and got down to the Calgary 40-yard line. Then first and 10 on the Calgary 4 line, guess what? Cody Fajardo, he threw another interception to Jonathan Moxey again. And Calgary got the ball back on their own 24-yard line with just over 4.5 minutes to go in the first quarter, I meant to say. On the next drive, Calgary did pick up a first down and got to their own 47-yard line, facing a 3rd and short. So in this time, Jake Mayer came in to quarterback for the short yardage. However, the Saskatchewan defense stopped Calgary, causing a turnover and downs. So now Saskatchewan had the ball on the Calgary 48, so they were already in Calgary territory after Saskatchewan stopped Calgary on a 3rd and short. And this is now down to with 1:38 to go in the first quarter. And then Saskatchewan drove deep into Calgary territory to wrap up the first quarter. Calgary still leading 7-0, but Saskatchewan was knocking on the door. Saskatchewan did ultimately settle for a field goal 30 seconds into the second quarter as their Brett Lowther, who kicked a 17-yard field goal to put Saskatchewan on the board. So Calgary had a 7-3 lead after 14:30 to go in the second quarter. Calgary next drive starting on their own 35-yard line. There was a challenge, a pass interference call that was not overturned, so the play stood. So Calgary on their own 46-yard line. Bo was looking for Markeith Ambles deep. However, Bad Bo showed up as he got intercepted by Ed Gainey. So Saskatchewan got the ball back on their own 38-yard line with 12:26 to go in the second quarter. Saskatchewan the next drive got into midfield, eventually led to a punt. and Calgary got the ball on their own 25-yard line with under 9 minutes to go in the second quarter, still 7-3 Calgary. Calgary got stopped with a 2-and-out and forced to punt. However, on that punt return, it was Jamal Morrow for Saskatchewan who returned a 69-yard return for a touchdown, and then with the convert afterwards, Saskatchewan now took a 10-7 lead with 7.5 minutes to go in the second quarter in the first half before halftime on the game's really big first play. So Jamal Morrow definitely showed in this game he is a threat for the Saskatchewan Roughriders on that missed field goal that didn't count, but he definitely returned a punt. So Saskatchewan had a 10-7 lead. Calgary in the next drive tried to answer back. They started on their own 29-yard line and got to the Saskatchewan 40-yard line, but they decided to punt the ball away. Ultimately, the ball went in the end zone, conceded for a single. So now it was 10-8 for Saskatchewan with 4:24 to go before halftime. After Saskatchewan had a 2-0 in the next drive, and Calgary started on their next drive on their own 38-yard line, Bo once again, he threw another interception, once again to Ed Gainey. So at this point, Jonathan Moxey for Calgary had 2 interceptions, and Ed Gainey had 2 interceptions for Saskatchewan. So there was 4 interceptions in this game. So Saskatchewan on that turnover got the ball back at their own 50-yard line with just over 2.5 minutes to go before halftime. On that turnover, Saskatchewan got close to midfield before Cardi Berjardo on a second and long play threw his 3rd interception of the half. And once again, he threw it to Jonathan Moxey. So Jonathan Moxey for Calgary had 3 interceptions. So Calgary got the ball at their own 40-yard line with just under 2.5 minutes to go before halftime. As mentioned, with Jonathan Moxey's 3 interceptions, tied a playoff franchise record for the Calgary Stampeders, set by Art Johnson. Well, I don't remember that because that happened back in 1963. So Calgary Stampeders made some history in the first half as Jonathan Moxey. He caught 3 balls from Joey Fajardo for 3 interceptions. However, on that drive, Calgary did get down to the Saskatchewan 28-yard line with under a minute to go. Did attempt a field goal. However, Rene Paredes, he definitely had a rough game in this one. He missed it wide right from 35 yards out, and Jamal Morrow, he got it out to the Saskatchewan 18-yard line. And then with 32 seconds left, Saskatchewan ran a couple plays and ran out the clock. So ultimately, Saskatchewan led 10-8. It was a fairly sloppy first half with like I said, there were 6 turnovers in this game at this point, as you had 3 interceptions for Calgary, 2 interceptions for Saskatchewan, and a 1 stop on turnover and downs. So before the teams went into the locker room, a scrum ensued, and Calgary eventually got in trouble, as it was Sean Levin for Calgary took a rough play disqualification and ultimately was kicked out of the game. However, Sean Levin alleged that Duke Williams for Saskatchewan did spit on him, but nothing came out on that. So on that penalty, Saskatchewan and their decision to defer the kickoff to the second half definitely set it up in their favor. So now going into the second half, Saskatchewan was kicking off on the Calgary 50-yard line as a result of the penalty. And what Saskatchewan ultimately decided to do is they attempted an onside kick, and it was recovered by A.C. Leonard. It's giving the Saskatchewan the ball to start off the second half. And then after Cody Fajardo ran Duke Williams' 20-yard play, Saskatchewan was first and goal early in the third quarter on that onside kick. Then the next play is Cody Fajardo. He connected to Kieran Schaefer-Baker in a 6-yard play for a touchdown. And then the point after, Saskatchewan now increased their lead to 17-8 with just over 13 minutes to go in the third quarter. So Saskatchewan definitely blew this game open with the onside kick to start off the second half and scoring a touchdown, taking advantage of the penalty that they received at the end of the first half. Calgary in the next drive did get 1 big catch for Reggie Bagleton, moving Calgary into Saskatchewan territory. Well, it looked like Calgary actually had a play set up for Colton Hunchuk in the end zone. He actually got injured on that play, and Calgary eventually settled for a field goal as Bo got sacked. Calgary eventually did get a 28-yard field goal from Rene Paredes, so now it's 17-11 for Saskatchewan. This was with 9:24 to go in the third quarter. Saskatchewan, the next drive, ended off with a 2-0, punted the ball back to Calgary, but another turnover as Malik Henry, he was not available for this game. As now he was injured, but he had some personal family matters to deal with that he was not available. So Reggie Bagleton was in return for this play. However, he lost it, and Saskatchewan recovered the punt on the Calgary 33-yard line. So Saskatchewan had prime field position. As a result of that play, on the next drive, Saskatchewan was held by the Calgary defense to a field goal attempt. However, Brett Lowther, he attempted a 43-yard field goal that hit the upright. It was a dead ball. So the game remained 17-11 for Saskatchewan. Now with 6:27 to go in the third quarter. Calgary the next drive got a couple big plays from running back Kadeen Carey, and Reggie Bakelston busted a ref and barely got Calgary into Saskatchewan territory. However, Calgary had to settle for a field goal, as Rene Paredes, this time he was good for 25 yards. So now the lead was cut down to 3, as Saskatchewan led 17-14 with 2:28 to go in the third quarter. Saskatchewan started on their own 35-yard line, had the ball, got up to midfield heading into the fourth quarter with a 17-14 lead. Saskatchewan got to the Calgary 16-yard line and eventually settled for a field goal. This time Brett Lowther for Saskatchewan was good from 16 yards out. So now Saskatchewan took a 20-14 lead with 13-14 to go in the fourth quarter at that point. Now Calgary starting with the ball at their own 35-yard line. Got a big play from Reggie Bakelston as Bo connected on a 46-yard play getting into Saskatchewan territory. Kadeen Carey had a couple 10-plus yard running plays, and after a Markeith Temple's play putting Calgary on the Saskatchewan 2-yard line. So after 2 attempts, the Calgary Stampeders was able to punch it in for the end zone as Kadeen Carey ran in a touchdown, and then the point after, Calgary now took a 21-20 lead with 9:37 to go in the fourth quarter. Saskatchewan the next drive got up to their own 43-yard line on a 2nd and long, and on a play, Cody Fajardo did throw an interception, not to Jonathan Moxey, but to Jameer Thurman, and Calgary had the ball back on the Saskatchewan 47-yard line, now with 7:26 to go into the fourth quarter. Calgary next drive did have to eventually settle for a field goal, so Rene Paredes, he was good from 47 yards out, so Calgary extended their lead by 4 to 24-20 with 5:38 to go in the fourth quarter. Then the Saskatchewan next drive was clutch for Cody Fajardo and his legacy as a Saskatchewan Roughrider at this point. Considering he threw 4 interceptions at this time, Saskatchewan starting on their own 35-yard line after the field goal. Duke Williams, he definitely had a big few plays in this drive, as well as Paul McRoberts. He definitely stood out for the Saskatchewan Roughriders late in this game. After William Powell got Saskatchewan down to the Calgary 2-yard line, eventually Cody Fajardo ran into touchdown, and with the point after, now Saskatchewan found themselves up 27-24 on a great drive with 2:33 left to go in the fourth quarter. So Calgary knew they had to get points on the next drive or their season was done. So Calgary on the next drive got into Saskatchewan territory on a Luker Hathanavu catch, and Kamar Jordan got Calgary closer to a manageable field goal attempt. However, before Bo got sacked on the Saskatchewan 4-yard line, Calgary was trying to look for the end zone and eventually settled for a field goal. So it looked like Calgary was trying to get closer, but eventually he got sacked, but still within field goal range. However, Rene Paredes looked shaky all game, and he eventually had to attempt another 47-yard field goal, which was just inside. It looked like that field goal was going to go wide. But Rene Paredes managed to be good to tie the game up at 27 apiece. This was less than 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Calgary knew they had to do a kickoff after the field goal, because that's the rule in the CFL, that after a field goal, most teams select to take the ball on their own 35-yard line. But if you kick a field goal with less than 3 minutes to go in the second half, you have to give a kickoff. So with the game tied at 27, Calgary kicked the ball off to Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan started their play on their own 32-yard line. After 2 running plays, Saskatchewan ran on the clock, and for the first time since I've been doing my Calgary Stampeders this month, this one needed overtime. As you do that for hockey, but in football, this one needed overtime. So we were tied at 27 going in overtime with a berth to the Western Final on the line and a date with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in IG Field. In overtime, Calgary won the toss but deferred, which is usually the strategy in overtime, is if you win the toss, you usually defer so you know what to aim for, as it's all mini-games starting on the opponent's 35-yard line. So Saskatchewan with the ball first, starting on the Calgary 35-yard line. Got a big play from William Powell, pushing Saskatchewan to the Calgary 16 or 18 yard line. After being stopped for the next two plays, Saskatchewan, which is exactly what Calgary wanted to do, was hold Saskatchewan to a field goal. And Brett Lowther was good on 20 yards out. So Saskatchewan now led 30-27 after Saskatchewan's first kick of the can in overtime, which meant if Calgary scored a touchdown, we would win this game. So Calgary, now with the ball, this is going north at Mosaic Stadium, at the same spot when Saskatchewan started. Calgary first went for the home run as Bo was looking for Reggie Bagleton deep, but no good. So Calgary got a first down on the Hergy Mailata catch, putting Calgary on the Saskatchewan 25-yard line for another set of downs. After Kadeen Carey just got stopped short on the first down as Calgary got to the Saskatchewan 17-yard line, Calgary attempted a field goal as Rene Paredes was good from 25 yards out to tie the game up at 30, so we have another mini game. This time we're going south, and now Calgary has the ball first. And on the next drive, Calgary going south, this is going towards Pill Country in Mosaic Stadium. So the next drive, Calgary's first pass was a loss as Bo looked for Reggie Bagleton on a 2nd and long in the end zone again, but it looked like Reggie Bagleton was closer and couldn't quite get it. So ultimately, the Calgary Stampeders had to settle for a field goal, hoping they could hold Saskatchewan to that. However, Rene Paredes missed a 44-yard field goal, opening the door for Saskatchewan. I felt at that moment that was it, that we were going to lose this game. And that's ultimately what happened, because on Saskatchewan's next drive, they got two plays from William Powell, getting Saskatchewan to the Calgary 30-yard line, setting up a field goal attempt, and Brett Lowther was dead center from 35 yards out, giving Saskatchewan a 30-30 win, and eliminating the Calgary Stampeders in a classic, but it definitely was a heartbreaker for me, as the Saskatchewan Roughriders advanced to the West Final against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So if you look at the several storylines and numbers for this game, well, I felt in the first half, Bad Bo showed up, but he looked better in the second half. Overall, Bo was 26 for 36. He threw for 285 yards, no touchdowns but 2 interceptions. Kadeen Carey had his best game as a Calgary Stampeder, as he in 22 carries, he had 117 yards and 2 touchdowns. Reggie Bagleton was lead receiver. He had 5 catches for 105 yards, and he came close to getting that one in overtime. Markeith Ambles was the other lead receiver. He had 7 catches for 72 yards. However, one of the stories in this game was Rene Paredes. He had a rough game. He was only 5 for 8 in field goals, 47 yards being his longest, but definitely missed that one in overtime, but not totally blaming this loss on him because there was mistakes on both sides. Then on the defensive side of the ball, well, Jamar Wall was the lead tackler. He had 7 tackles, and then Jonathan Moxey, he had 3 interceptions. So on the Saskatchewan side of the ball, well, Cody Fajardo, he had depends how you slice how good of a game he had. Because passing the ball, he was 22 for 33. He only threw for 189 yards. He threw for that 1 touchdown, but he threw 4 interceptions. However, on the ground, he was the lead rusher. He had 10 carries for 89 yards, including that 1 touchdown that really mattered the most late in the fourth quarter. Well, William Powell, he also had a pretty good game too, rushing the ball with 18 carries for 73 yards. Then leading receivers, well, Duke Williams, 5 catches for 55 yards. If indeed he did spit on Sean Levin, he might have got away with it because Duke Williams was huge for Saskatchewan on that drive that Saskatchewan went up 27-24. And then Brett Lowther and William Powell also had 7 catches, 55 yards. And Brett Lowther, he was 3 for 4 in field goals, but his longest was only 34 yards, which was the one that ultimately was the game winner. And then Jamal Morrill, that was also the huge story in this game. He had that 69-yard punt return for a touchdown. And then on the defensive side of the ball, well, Dean Lacey was the lead tackler with 12 tackles. And then Nate Gainey, he had 7 tackles and 2 interceptions. So ultimately, it was the Hamilton Tiger-Cats and the Saskatchewan Roughriders that have advanced to the finals in the CFL Playoffs. So which set up on Sunday, December 5th, as you had the East Final, where you had the Hamilton Tiger-Cats going to Toronto to take on the Toronto Argonauts. That was a 10:30 kickoff at BMO Field. how I'm going to remember this game was early in the game, Toronto had all the momentum. Toronto outplayed the Hamilton Tiger Cats, but they settled for field goals instead of getting a couple touchdowns. If Toronto would have gotten a couple touchdowns early in this game, we might have had a different ball game. And also the fact that Jeremiah Mazzoli started in the first quarter for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, struggled and was replaced by Dane Evans, and it seemed to got the offense going, but I felt the game did not turn for Hamilton's favor until the third quarter when Poppy White returned a punt return for a touchdown, and that seemed to wake up the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and ultimately the Hamilton Tiger Cats, they won this one 27-19 for the Hamilton Tiger Cats to go back home and to be able to host the Grey Cup, as the Grey Cup was in Hamilton at Tim Hortons Field the next week. And then to highlight the players that stood out for the both sides of the ball, well, Hamilton, well, Dane Evans, he was 16 for 16 for 249 yards. He had one touchdown, no interceptions. He also ran in 2 touchdowns, and he had a forced fumble. There was a forced fumble that he had in the late in the second quarter that might have turned the game around as well for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Don Jackson, he had a big game on the ground with 16 carries for 95 yards. Jalen Ackland was the lead receiver for Hamilton. He had 8 catches for 112 yards and a touchdown. And then the Poppy White, that touchdown from the punt return was for 92 yards. That was definitely the turning point of the game because it was still 12-0 for Hamilton, or Toronto at that point. Before that touchdown by Hamilton, and Cianti Evans was the leading tackler with 7 tackles. On the Toronto side of the ball, it was McCall Bethel Thompson. He was 24 for 38 in passing for 283 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Hamilton, once again, they contained the running game for Toronto as DJ Foster only had 11 carries for 38 yards. Curly Gittins Jr. was lead receiver. He had 4 catches for 74 yards. And I mentioned Toronto settled for a lot of field goals where they could have got touchdowns. Well, Boris Beatty, he was busy. He was 6 for 7 field goals. He had a 47-yard as his longest, but he had a couple chip shots early in the first half that I think if Toronto would have gotten touchdowns early in that game, it would have been a different ball game. And then Hioka Mamba was the leading tackler for Toronto. He had 7 tackles and then 1 forced fumble. And of course, there was a couple other ugly stuff that happened with the Toronto Argonauts that you can look up the story, what I mean, with the vice president and a couple players that got fined in this one. So that was the East Final, so we knew that the Hamilton Tiger Cats were going to be going back to the Grey Cup for the second straight year, this time with Hamilton hosting it. Well, who's going to join them? As the West Final, you had the Saskatchewan Roughriders after they beat my Calgary Stampeders. They were taking on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at IG Field at 2 p.m. kickoff, and it was a very, very cold game, and I felt I'll remember this game on all the turnovers that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers cost, but they still were able to win this one because ultimately Andrew Harris was the running back that came back for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and rejuvenated them, and ultimately Winnipeg was the more talented team, but it was closer than it needed to be because ultimately the Winnipeg Blue Bombers defeated the Saskatchewan Roughriders 21-17, and this was a 2 p.m. kickoff at IG Field, ultimately setting up a rematch from last year in 2019, where you had the Hamilton Tiger Cats and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers meeting in the Grey Cup, but this time the Hamilton Tiger Cats would have home field advantage. So to highlight the players who stood out on either side, well, Saskatchewan, well, Cody Fajardo, he had a better game than he did in the semifinal. He was 19 for 27 for 265 yards and a touchdown, while the Winnipeg defense definitely contained the running attack. As William Powell, he had 11 carries for 32 yards and a touchdown. While Duke Williams, he had 4 catches for 108 yards and a touchdown. Duke Williams had that one big play, but it looked like there was also one controversial play that Duke Williams had where it looked like he had some help with the ground to catch the ball. And then Dion Lacey was the leading tackler for Saskatchewan with 7 tackles and 1 forced fumble. So that was Saskatchewan. They definitely played stingy in this one. While on the Winnipeg side of the ball, Zach Claros, he still had a pretty good game, although he had a couple interceptions that got tipped. He was 17 for 21 for 229 yards. He had a touchdown, about 3 interceptions, but a couple of them were tips. Andrew Harris definitely was the big storyline for this game. He had 23 carries for 136 yards and a touchdown. Rasheed Bailey was the leading receiver. He had 3 catches for 56 yards and a touchdown. And then Adam Bighill was the lead tackler with 8 tackles. However, I got to mention that Winnipeg as a team, they had 6 turnovers. So it wasn't a pretty game, but we're setting up for the 108th Grey Cup to have the Hamilton Tiger-Cats and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Excuse me. So now, let's do a full recap of the 108th Grey Cup in Hamilton. As I mentioned, excuse me, you got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers going into Hamilton to take on the Hamilton Tiger-Cats, as Hamilton had the ultimate home field advantage being at Tim Hortons Field at 4 p.m. As I mentioned, this was a rematch for 2019, and the wind was a factor in this game. So how the game started off, it definitely started off slow with a defensive struggle, as Winnipeg kicked off the ball to Hamilton to start off the 108th Grey Cup. Both Hamilton and Winnipeg on their first drive ended with a 2-and-out. The first turnover of this game actually went to Hamilton, as Hamilton, as they were going on their second drive, ended off a punt, but they recovered a Jerry Nary and Grant fumble, giving Hamilton the ball at their own 49-yard line, with 11:24 to go in the first quarter. So this time Winnipeg had the first turnover in this game. However, the next play, Dane Evans threw an interception at Alden Darby, so Winnipeg got the ball back. So right after that, Bot's punt return and interception, so both teams had their first turnovers out of the way right away. As mentioned, Dane Evans did start in this game after his big game in the East Final, but he did not finish, as I'll get to shortly. So on the Winnipeg interception, on that drive, they did get down to the Hamilton 30-yard line and attempted a field goal that Sergio Castillo was good from 38 yards out. So Winnipeg took a 3-0 lead with 8:29 to go in the first quarter. As mentioned, this was a defensive struggle that continued on both sides, as Hamilton drive ended with a punt after that field goal. Winnipeg next drive also did end with a punt, but Mark Gallagio punt went out of bounds in the wind, giving a single. So Winnipeg now had a 4-0 lead with 2:46 to go in the first quarter. Hamilton next drive ended off with a punt, and Winnipeg got the ball back heading into the second quarter. At the Hamilton 20-yard line, they had a 4-0 lead. So the game, as I mentioned, started off with a defensive struggle and a couple of turnovers on our side. That's all I can highlight the first quarter of this Grey Cup. Eventually, Winnipeg did score the field goal against the wind, as Sergio Castillo was good from 34 yards out. So Winnipeg now took a 7-0 lead. This was 13:22 to go in the second quarter. Next two drives were another 2-and-outs for both sides, with Winnipeg still leading 7-0 with 9 minutes to go in the second quarter. Now, Hamilton started off with their next drive on their own 32-yard line and did sustain a major drive for the first one of this game. However, at midfield with 7:33 left to go in the second quarter, Dane Evans for Hamilton got injured on the play, and ultimately Jeremiah Mazzoli took over. And given how they used both quarterbacks, Hamilton wasn't really too panicked on next man up in this one. Most teams would be panicked if their starting quarterback got hurt in the Grey Cup, but not Hamilton. And Hamilton kept driving with a big drive from Don Jackson, with Jeremiah Mazzoli now in the game, as Dane Evans did not return in this one. However, Hamilton did get down to the Winnipeg 5-yard line, but settled for a field goal, as Michael Dunwalga was good from 13 yards out. So now Winnipeg had a 7-3 lead with 2:41 to go in the second quarter. After the next 3 drives ended with a 2-and-out, Hamilton had the ball on the Winnipeg 48-yard line with 30 seconds to go just before halftime. After a big run by Don Jackson that set Hamilton on the Winnipeg 12-yard line, eventually it was Jeremiah Mazzoli. He connected with Stephen Dunmore at a 12-yard touchdown, and the point after convert now put Hamilton up 10-7 with 10 seconds to go in the first half. After the kickoff, Winnipeg had the ball on their own 23-yard line, basically ran out the clock, so Hamilton now had a 10-7 lead at halftime after a very defensive first half. And then the entertainment was the Lumineers opened up the act for the Arkells, so that was who performed, but I did not capture video of that because I did not go to the Grey Cup, and it felt weird not being at the Grey Cup this year, as I watched it right here at home. Second half began with Winnipeg kicking off to Hamilton as Winnipeg wanted to have the win in the fourth quarter, as the wind definitely was a factor this whole game. And ultimately, Hamilton drive ended with a 2-0. Winnipeg first drive began on the 38-yard line for Winnipeg in the second half, third quarter. On that drive, Winnipeg did sustain drive with a couple of Nick Dembski plays that got Winnipeg down to the Hamilton 6-yard line. Hamilton defense did hold them, so Winnipeg had to settle for a field goal, as Sergio Castillo was good from 15 yards out. So now the game is tied at 10-10 with 8:34 to go in the third quarter. So Winnipeg sustained a long drive for their first crack of the ball in the second half. Hamilton next drive ended off with a 2-0. But on the next Winnipeg drive, on the Hamilton 40-yard line, it was a 2nd and 6 play, Zach Claros actually threw an interception to Cameron Kelly, giving Hamilton the ball back on the Winnipeg 37-yard line. It felt like Hamilton needed that because Winnipeg definitely had the momentum in the second half and also winning the time possession. On that turnover, Hamilton did actually take advantage as Don Jackson eventually had a big run. And eventually it led to a Jeremiah Mazzoli to Brandon Bakes touchdown 18-yard play on the 2nd and 9. So after the point after convert, Hamilton now took a 17-10 lead with 3:47 to go in the third quarter. Then the next drive for Winnipeg, it was almost a repeat of the last Winnipeg drive because Winnipeg once again ended off with Zach Claros throwing an interception once again to Cameron Kelly, and it was Hamilton having the ball on the Winnipeg 46-yard line. However, this time the Winnipeg defense forced a 2-0, and with the wind being in their face, Winnipeg received the punt deep in their own end, and Hamilton defense forced Winnipeg to another 2-0, which ultimately led to them conceding a safety. So now we had a 19-10 lead for Hamilton with 51 seconds to go into the third quarter. After the kickoff, Hamilton was driving into Winnipeg territory, up 19-10 heading into the fourth quarter. So at this point, things were starting to look a little better for Hamilton, that maybe they're going to finally win the Grey Cup at home to end their drought, as Winnipeg last won the Grey Cup last year, but Hamilton was looking for their first Grey Cup since 1999. However, eventually Hamilton got deep into Winnipeg territory looking for a touchdown, but had to settle for a field goal, as Michael DeMalga was good from 10 yards out. So Hamilton now took a 22-10 lead with 12:03 to go in the fourth quarter. Winnipeg next drive got on going with a couple of Andrew Harris runs and a big Rasheed Bailey play, moving Winnipeg down to the Hamilton 12-yard line. However, Winnipeg did have to settle for a field goal, as Sergio Castillo was good from 20 yards out to chip away to make it now 22-13 for Hamilton. This was 8:42 left in the fourth quarter. Hamilton next drive ended with a 2-0, punting the ball back to Winnipeg. Winnipeg started the next drive on the Hamilton 48-yard line. Now we're 6:56 to go in the fourth quarter, and Zach Claros got a big play from Zach Claros to Nick Dembski and a 29-yard play for a touchdown. Now at the point after, that cut the lead down to 22-20 for Hamilton. And this is now with 5:46 to go in the fourth quarter, so this game was setting up to be a classic as well. On the kickoff, after Hamilton touchdown, Hamilton touched the ball and it went into the end zone, and that went for a single. So now we have 22-21 for Hamilton with 5:30 to go left in the fourth quarter as the wind plays havoc. But Hamilton, because of giving up the single, they get the ball at their own 35-yard line to start. So sometimes you got to make that decision when it comes to field position, and we'll revisit one particular play a little later that might be questioned, should they have done that. However, the next drive ended with a 2-0, punting the ball back to Winnipeg. So Winnipeg had the ball at their own 51-yard line with 3:49 to go in the fourth quarter, down by 1. Winnipeg did drive into Hamilton territory after the 3-minute warning. Eventually, Winnipeg did settle for a field goal, as it was Sergio Castillo. He was good for 45 yards out to give Winnipeg a 24-22 lead, with a minute 52 to go in the fourth quarter. Now remember, with under 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, the CFL rule does state that if you kick a field goal, you need to kick the ball off. So what happened after that field goal, on the kickoff, Hamilton did receive the kickoff. Keep in mind it was 24-22 for Winnipeg at this point. And Hamilton received the kickoff. It was Tim White for Hamilton that received the kickoff. However, Hamilton was in their own end zone when he received the ball, Tim White. And he conceded a single, like he was told to do that, in their own end. So now that made the game 25-20 for Winnipeg, with a minute 50 to go left in the fourth quarter. That meant that Hamilton would have gotten the ball at their own 35-yard line, but the debate that came in on that decision was it looked like Tim White, he had some room to potentially run out and maybe got to the 35-yard line, but then you also got to look at, well, what happens if he fumbled the ball too? So that was the controversial decision right there. So Tim White conceded a single to make it a 3-point deficit instead of 2 with a minute 50 to go. So we got to question that decision on Tim White. So anyway, on that drive, when Hamilton started on their own 35-yard line, they got into midfield and they were facing a 3rd and 8 situation with 1:15 left in the fourth quarter. This was pretty much the ball game right there, as Jeremiah Mazzoli, he made a huge clutch catch pass to Jalen Ackland, and he made a clutch 9-yard catch to keep the game going for Hamilton, keeping the drive alive. So eventually, after that, it was first down for Hamilton going into Winnipeg territory. Hamilton got a couple big plays from Don Jackson, and Brandon Banks getting them down to the Winnipeg 10-yard line with 33 seconds left in the fourth quarter. So at worst case, Winnipeg or Hamilton could be kicking a field goal against Winnipeg, and we need overtime. Where that debate comes in about the Tim White decision. So after a timeout, Hamilton got down to the Winnipeg 5-yard line on a Don Jackson run, setting up a 2nd and goal. And it looked like Jeremiah Mazzoli, he almost found Jalen Ackland again. It would have been fitting if Jalen Ackland would have caught that touchdown. However, the play was broken up by Dietrich Nichols, deflected it, forcing Hamilton to settle for a field goal. And Hamilton did score a field goal as Michael DeMalaga was good from 13 yards out to tie up the game at 25 with 6 seconds to go in the fourth quarter. So after the kickoff to Winnipeg was stopped, guess what? Just like the West semifinal, this one needs overtime, and it's the 4th time in Grey Cup history that the big game needed overtime, and we'll go over the games that needed overtime in a minute. So in overtime, Hamilton won the toss, and they deferred to go second, giving Winnipeg the ball. However, the first play for Winnipeg in overtime, where they had the ball on the Hamilton 35-yard line, was a short run to Andrew Harris. Then the next play was no good for Winnipeg on a passing play, but Hamilton was offside, make it 2nd and short. And then on the next play, Winnipeg got the ball moving as Andrew Harris got Winnipeg down to the Hamilton 13-yard line. In overtime, after the first down play was no good, Zach Claris on the 2nd down, he connected with Darvin Adams in the end zone on a 13-yard touchdown. Now, in overtime, if you score a touchdown, you must go for 2. So on a 2-point conversion, it was Zach Claris, he connected with Sheed Bailey, putting Winnipeg up 33-25, forcing Hamilton, they have to match in their mini game or the game is over. So Hamilton starting on the Winnipeg 35-yard line, did get a good run from Don Jackson, but a holding penalty pushed Hamilton back 10 yards, so now it was 1st and 20 at the 45-yard line. So the odds were looking a little bit longer for the Hamilton Tiger Cats to at least tie it up and match, or Winnipeg gets the Grey Cup. Then what happened after that was a short game by Don Jackson, set up a 2nd and 18 on the Winnipeg 43-yard line. Then ultimately, spoiler alert, the final game of the play happened as it was Jeremiah Mazzoli basically was forced to pass, need to get 18 yards to get a first down, was tipped twice, and eventually it was Kyrie Wilson for Winnipeg. He picked up the interception, needed the ball, and Winnipeg ultimately won their 12th Grey Cup with a 33-25 win to successfully defend their Grey Cup. I'm going to say Hamilton Tiger Cat fans were way more heartbroken than I was 2 weeks earlier, as Hamilton, they were up by 12 at one point in this game in the fourth quarter with the big game at home. However, I felt, Winnipeg was gutsy. There were a couple penalties that costed the Hamilton Tiger Cats that ultimately Winnipeg was the better team, and they ultimately won their 12th Grey Cup by defeating the Hamilton Tiger Cats 33-25. So congratulations to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on successfully defend their title, and the drought still continues for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, since they have not won it since 1999. So as I mentioned, this was the 4th time in history that the Grey Cup needed overtime. Well, the first time the Grey Cup needed to go to overtime was the 49th Grey Cup back in 1961, where finally it was the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the Hamilton Tiger Cats that met in that one. Well, guess what? The Winnipeg Blue Bombers defeated the Hamilton Tiger Cats 21-14 in that Grey Cup. That was played at CNE Stadium in Toronto. Then the second time the Grey Cup needed overtime was the 93rd Grey Cup in 2005, as you had the Edmonton Eskimos. They defeated the Montreal Alouettes 38-35 in this one, and that game was played at BC Place in Vancouver. And then the third time the Grey Cup needed overtime was the 104th Grey Cup in 2016, and definitely too familiar with this one because I was on the wrong end of this one as a fan, as the Ottawa Redblacks, they pulled off the upset. They defeated the Calgary Stampeders 39-33, and that game was played at BMO Field in Toronto. And then the 4th time was the most latest Grey Cup, the 108th Grey Cup in 2021, where ultimately the Winnipeg Blue Bombers defeated the Hamilton Tiger Cats 33-25, and that game was at Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton. So that's a little history lesson on the 4 Grey Cups that needed overtime. So now, let's take a look at the numbers for both sides. As for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, well, Jeremiah Masoli, after he took over for Dane Evans, he was 20 for 25. He had 185 yards passing, 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Unfortunately, that 1 interception came on the last play of the game. Dane Evans, he wasn't really that effective, as he was 4 for 9. He threw for 24 yards before the injury. He had no touchdowns and 1 interception. Rushing the ball, Don Jackson led the way with 11 carries for 59 yards. Jeremiah Masoli, he also had 6 carries for 35 yards. Now when it comes to receivers, lead receiver for Hamilton was Stephen Dunbar. He had 6 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown. Don Jackson also had a good game receiving with 7 catches for 48 yards. Field goals, it was Michael Demaga. He was 3 for 3, 36 yards being the longest. And the leading defenders I'll highlight was Javon Santos-Knox. He led the way with 8 tackles. Samoa Lawrence, he had 6 tackles, and then Cameron Kelly had those 2 interceptions in the 3rd quarter. So on the Winnipeg side of the ball, Zach Collaros, he was 21 for 32 in passing for 240 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Andrew Harris, he had 18 carries for 80 yards for the leading rusher, Leading receiver was Darvin Adams. He had 5 catches for 61 yards and a touchdown. And then Rasheed Bailey, he also had 3 catches for 60 yards. And then Sergio Castillo, he was 5 for 5 in field goals with 45 yards. Funny that both of these teams, they had kicking issues throughout the season, but both kickers were perfect in this game. Now when it comes to the defensive side of the ball, well, Alden Derby, he had 6 tackles and 1 interception. That was early in the 1st quarter. And then Kyrie Wilson, he had 5 tackles and that 1 interception that sealed it for Winnipeg. And Adam Bighill, he had 5 tackles for Winnipeg as well. So most outstanding player went to Zach Collaros for Winnipeg. And the top Canadian of the Grey Cup was Nick Dembski. Now with this being a later Grey Cup, the CFL schedule actually got released for the 2022 season. So actually we'll get to take a look ahead. So the next game for the Calgary Stampeders to start off the 2022 season, barring no more variants, no more bullshit with COVID and fans can go to the games, and we have all 18 games, I gotta say that. Well, the next game for the Calgary Stampeders, which will start season 4 of my Calgary Stampeders this month, will be on Saturday, May the 28th, as the Calgary Stampeders will be hosting the BC Lions for the first of 2 preseason games. That will be a 2 p.m. kickoff at McMahon Stadium. So the schedule is out for next season for the Calgary Stampeders. So let's take a look at the schedule, shall we, for the Calgary Stampeders, and debate about the schedule, shall we? As it queued up, so that will be the next episode of my Calgary Stampeders this month, as I'll do a May episode, as hopefully we'll have a preseason and have a better idea how the team looks. Of course, after free agency, all that. The second preseason game for the Calgary Stampeders will be on Friday, June the 3rd, as the Calgary Stampeders will be on the road up in Edmonton to take on the Elks. That'll be a 7 p.m. kickoff at Commonwealth. The regular season begins for the Calgary Stampeders on Thursday, June the 9th, as the Calgary Stampeders will be hosting the Montreal Alouettes. That'll be a 7 p.m. kickoff on Thursday, June the 9th. And then the Calgary Stampeders, I'll just highlight these couple of games, but if you look at the schedule, the Calgary Stampeders actually play the Elks 4 times in the regular season, all up to Labor Day. And then the fact that if you look at also the schedule, the Calgary Stampeders do not play the Saskatchewan Roughriders on a back-to-back until late October. I'm not going to go through the whole schedule. It's already a long enough video. But also the other things to note is the Calgary Stampeders. They don't get to go to Montreal, and I don't think Ottawa comes here. So that's the only thing I complain about the schedule is, thankfully there's only one Thursday night game, and that's at the start of the season. Of course, with my work schedule, I have to take the Friday off from work. But I think I still would like to see everybody. We don't need 4 games against the Elks, but maybe that's 4 straight wins. But the big off-season news already for the CFL is the fact that I think his name is Sean Burke, got named general manager of the Ottawa Red Blacks. He was the director of player personnel for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And Chris Jones is actually coming back to Edmonton to be the head coach, general manager, and defensive coordinator after the Elks cleaned house. So that's so far the big news. So to get my final thoughts on the Calgary Stampeders this season, while it was disappointing that we did not win the Grey Cup, I did feel the Calgary Stampeders were going to take a little bit of a step back this year. And I'm going to say, considering where the Calgary Stampeders were, I'm always going to look at that Hamilton game in September, when we were 2-5, where Bo was outplayed by David Watford. I was down on the Calgary Stampeders that time. I thought, that's it, we're not going to make the playoffs this year. Then that big October came, where we turned things around and got back in the race and won the playoffs that we actually had hope. And of course, the other big storylines with the Calgary Stampeders this year, now they're celebrating their 75th anniversary season, is maybe there's a quarterback controversy. I mean, Jake Maier is a free agent. He looked like he was ready to maybe be the next man up for the Calgary Stampeders. Bo is signed to next year, although with the salary cap. But given that the CFL needs to work on, trying to convince players to sign more than one season. Basically, I think 75% of the league is free agents right now. And I know the biggest free agents for the Calgary Stampeders right now was still Kadeem Carey. We did sign Trey Roberson to a 2-year deal. Thankfully, we got Trey Roberson back late in the season. But we still got Kadeem Carey, Jake Maier, and Reggie Bagleton. Hopefully those players manage to sign. So when it comes to off-season content, when it comes to the Calgary Stampeders and the CFL, unless anything major happens that I feel need to make a separate video on. Of course, the debate about potential rule changes, but I think the league might have purposely put that out there with potentially 4 downs just to get people talking about it. Maybe there won't be major changes, but if anything outrageous changes in the off-season, for any big trades, I'll make a video on it. But I think when it comes to CFL content, I will wait until free agent frenzy on who's staying with the Calgary Stampeders, who's going, and look around to see any big names that move around the league. And then, of course, you got the global and the Canadian college draft, but hopefully, this season will be a little more normal as possible, that we'll have a training camp preseason. That would also indicate that although scoring was down in the CFL this year, I didn't think it diminished the product that much. I mean, yeah, maybe some offenses couldn't get, on the same page because of less prep time, but a lot of games were close. I mean, I had to stick till the very end, most Calgary Stampeder games this year. Heck, 2 of the 5 playoff games needed overtime, including the championship game. So, I'm going to say I'm just glad that we had a season this season. After missing it last season, yes, things could play out differently, but hopefully, who knows how this pandemic goes, but I'm definitely suffering from burnout and cold fatigue, but at least I'm glad I got to get this in, and let's put a bow on Season 3. And I just say, definitely my highlights was, be able to do a couple football trips where I went up to Edmonton and went to Regina, caught the Calgary Stampeders there, and also, just trying to I met the CFL Hobo at the home opener, and that was ultimately why I was cheering for the Hamilton Tirecats. He's that blogger, you can look him up, CFL Hobo. And also the fact that when I was in Regina, I bumped into Corey Mace on the street and got a picture with him. So it was ultimately, I'm going to say a successful season, not necessarily how you drew it up, but I just say consider Calgary was in September and how they finished. Yes, it was very, very heartbreaking, but I think we had a fairly young team, and I felt like we were going to take a step back. And if this was taking a step back this year and still made the playoffs, and we could have still beaten Saskatchewan and maybe Winnipeg, I still like the future, but we'll see how free agent frenzy and draft goes. Not only here, as well as the rest of the league. So that's just enough of my final thoughts. I'm just looking forward to next season, which will be my 25th season as a season ticket holder, believe it or not, for the Calgary Stampeders. Man, I'm getting old. That's all I can say. Well, I will turn 40 next year as well. So, yeah, it is what it is. So, as I say, if you definitely made it this far, so I just want to say thanks a lot. And, of course, I want to close out and say if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans' journey, home the Flames, Shipping, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, just make sure you hit like and subscribe, and mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel where I recap games and stories and that. But I also do a variety of non-sports content like personal vlogs, attempt to comedy. I also do share experience I'm on the road or a sport event, which I was able to pick up a few of those moments throughout the season, but sadly I was not at the Grey Cup in Hamilton this year, and it just didn't feel right, me watching the game here. Next year is still a big question mark. In Regina, the issue I'm going to have is finding a room that doesn't cost more than renting an acre on the moon, and unless I have family that wants to, don't mind me having over, but I'll still try to figure that out. But as I say, as well as logging to go, so if it all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, to follow along with this Calgary sports fans' journey, you do just make sure you hit like and subscribe. I also have my other social links down in the description below. For other ways you can follow me, of course, I have my second channel in Brett Hornby Shorts, where I put my short form content on there, where, for example, I put quick game recaps for the Calgary Stampeders this past season, as well as all 5 playoff games that happened on the road to the 108th Grey Cup. So I say, yeah, this is definitely much, much later than ideal, and then, of course, it's making my notes and having time to record that made it even later, but games got in, got the video made, so I just want to say thanks for watching, and just looking forward to some off-season content to see what the off-season has in store, if there's any big trades or big moves. I mean, already Sean Burke being the general manager for the Ottawa Red Blacks, and Chris Jones, as a polar as a figure he is, he's going back to the Edmonton Elks. Those are already the 2 big storylines that have happened in the off-season, as both those teams are looking to rebound for our off-season. So we'll see what happens. So I want to say go Stamps go. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Let's have some KFC, or let's drink some Pop Shop, suck on some candy canes, or just a generic popcorn container, because I had fun with these memes with these jerseys. I finally got one myself. Blank, because who do I pick? And the family joke is if I get that player, that player's going to get traded, but with 75% of league free agents, I just have to keep this one blank. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.